For 10 years, no one could read it. Not journalists, not theologians, not cardinals, not even the priests who had worked beside him for decades. The document remained sealed, hidden from public view, entrusted to the silence that often surrounds the final years of a man's life. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The seal was broken, the text became public, and within a few hours, Catholics around the world were reading words that had been waiting a decade to be heard. Words written not by a rebel, not by a dissident, not by a man seeking attention, but by one of the most influential churchmen of modern Italy. A cardinal who spent decades at the very center of ecclesiastical life. A man trusted by popes. A man respected by bishops. A man whose loyalty to the church was never seriously questioned. And yet, hidden within his spiritual testament was a sentence so striking that it immediately overshadowed everything else. A sentence that many Catholics have not stopped discussing since. A sentence that seems simple at first glance. But once you understand who wrote it, when he wrote it, and why he chose to keep it hidden until after his death, its significance becomes impossible to ignore. Let's begin with the facts. On June 16, 2026, Cardinal Camillo Ruini died in Rome at the age of 95. For younger Catholics, the name may not immediately resonate. For older Catholics, however, it is impossible to separate modern Italian Catholicism from the figure of Ruini. For nearly 2 decades, he was one of the most influential voices in the Church. His funeral took place in St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Leo XIV presided. The atmosphere was solemn, respectful, grateful. And then, 2 days later, another event occurred. Ruini's spiritual testament was published. The document had been written exactly 10 years earlier, June 3, 2016. The title itself was revealing. Thanksgiving and request for forgiveness to God and my brothers. Notice what is absent. No political language, no ecclesiastical program, no attempt to shape the future. The title sounds like what one expects from an elderly priest preparing to meet God. A man taking stock of his life, a man reflecting on grace, a man preparing for eternity. But appearances can be deceiving, because to understand why this testament matters, you must first understand who Camillo Ruini was. He was born in Sassuolo in 1931, ordained a priest in 1954, eventually becoming one of the dominant figures of Italian Catholic life. John Paul II trusted him. Benedict XVI respected him. Italian bishops listened to him. Politicians feared him. For years he served as president of the Italian Episcopal Conference. For years he served as Vicar General of Rome. For years he shaped the public face of Catholicism in Italy. When debates emerged regarding abortion, family policy, bioethics, marriage, and the role of Christianity in society, Ruini was almost always at the center of the discussion. He was not a marginal figure. He was not a traditionalist outsider. He was not a commentator speaking from the sidelines. He was the establishment. And that is precisely why this story matters. Because criticism from an opponent is expected. Criticism from a loyal son is something entirely different. Let's examine the testament itself. Most of it is deeply personal, almost painfully humble. Ruini thanks God for the gift of life. He thanks God for his vocation. He thanks God for his family. He reflects upon his weaknesses. He speaks of the limits of his faith. He asks forgiveness. He asks mercy. There is nothing revolutionary in those sections, nothing controversial, nothing that would surprise anyone familiar with the spiritual writings of elderly churchmen. In fact, one gets the impression of a man stripping away every title and every honor. No cardinal, no bishop, no public figure. Simply a Christian preparing to appear before God. Then, the document reaches the section that everyone is talking about. And here we must proceed carefully. Because many people have already tried to use Ruini's words for purposes he himself would likely reject. The testament does not attack Pope Francis. The testament does not denounce Pope Francis. The testament does not accuse Pope Francis. In fact, Ruini begins by expressing affection and gratitude. His words are explicit. When Francis was elected, he says, he was delighted. He immediately supported him. He appreciated his missionary zeal. He thanked him for his service. These are not the words of an enemy, they are the words of a loyal churchman. And that is exactly why what comes next carries such weight. Because after expressing gratitude and support, Ruini adds a qualification that changes the entire tone of the passage. He writes, "I must confess, however, that I find myself in an uncomfortable situation." Notice the restraint. He does not speak of outrage, he does not speak of betrayal, he does not speak of scandal, he speaks of discomfort. The language is measured, deliberate, almost understated. Then comes the sentence that immediately captured worldwide attention. He writes that he struggled to understand certain orientations which, in his judgment, seemed to reopen wounds that after the council had healed only with difficulty. Read that sentence again. Not wounds that never existed, not wounds invented by critics, not wounds exaggerated by bloggers, real wounds. Wounds that required decades to heal. Wounds connected directly to the aftermath of the Second Vatican Council. This is where the story becomes much larger than Cardinal Ruini himself, because for decades, Catholics have argued about the legacy of Vatican II. Some describe the council as a renewal, others describe it as the beginning of confusion. Most Catholics occupy positions somewhere between those extremes. But here is what makes Ruini's testimony remarkable. He is not questioning the council itself. He is acknowledging something many people prefer not to discuss: the existence of wounds, the existence of division, the existence of fractures. Not theoretical fractures, real ones. Fractures that affected parishes, seminaries, religious communities, families, entire dioceses. And according to Ruini, those wounds required enormous effort to heal. Now ask yourself a question. If a man like Camillo Ruini says that wounds existed, who can honestly pretend they did not? This is not Archbishop Lefebvre speaking. This is not the Society of St. Pius X speaking. This is not a traditionalist publication speaking. This is the very figure who for decades represented the stable center of Italian Catholicism. And he is acknowledging that the post-conciliar period left wounds behind. That admission alone is historically significant. But then comes the second admission. According to Ruini, certain developments appeared to be reopening those wounds. Again, notice the precision. He does not say destroying the church. He does not say causing a schism. He does not say creating heresy. He says reopening wounds. A physician understands the image immediately. A wound can heal. A wound can scar. A wound can remain closed for years. And then, through pressure or trauma, it can open again. That is the image Ruini chooses. And because he chooses it, Catholics are now asking an unavoidable question. What exactly were those wounds? And what exactly reopened them? The testament itself does not provide a detailed answer. Ruini leaves the statement deliberately restrained. But perhaps that restraint is what makes it so powerful. Because rather than offering conclusions, he offers a diagnosis. A diagnosis from a man who spent decades watching the church from within. A diagnosis written privately. A diagnosis never intended for immediate publication. A diagnosis preserved for 10 years until the day he could no longer be asked to revise it, soften it, or explain it away. And that detail changes everything. Because these words were not written during a debate, they were not written during an interview, they were not written for applause, they were written for eternity. The more carefully one reads Cardinal Ruini's testament, the more one realizes that the most important words are often the quietest ones. Not the dramatic words, not the emotional words, the quiet words, the restrained words, the words of a man who spent 70 years serving the Church and understood that sometimes understatement communicates more than accusation ever could. Because Ruini did not write that the Church was collapsing. He did not write that the Council had failed. He did not write that Pope Francis was wrong. Instead, he wrote something far more difficult to dismiss. He admitted that there were wounds, and he admitted that he feared some of those wounds were opening again. This distinction matters, because wounds are not imaginary. They leave scars, they leave memories, they leave consequences that remain long after the original event has passed. And anyone old enough to remember the decades after the Second Vatican Council knows exactly what Ruini was describing. For younger Catholics, the post-conciliar period often exists only in books. For older Catholics, it was lived reality. Seminaries emptied, religious orders declined, liturgical experiments multiplied, parishes divided, priests argued, families argued. Entire communities found themselves caught between competing interpretations of what the Council actually meant. One side spoke of renewal, another spoke of rupture. One side saw continuity, another saw revolution. The arguments lasted decades, and in many places they never truly ended. What happened instead was something more subtle. The conflicts became quieter, the wounds appeared to close, the visible battles faded, life continued. And many Catholics assumed the crisis had finally passed. Apparently, Cardinal Ruini was not entirely convinced. This is why his testimony matters so much. Not because he offers a detailed analysis, but because he confirms the existence of something many people have spent years denying: the existence of unresolved tensions beneath the surface. And this brings us to a question that no serious observer can avoid. Why did Ruini wait until after his death to publish these words? Think carefully about that. The testament was written in June 2016, 10 years ago. 10 years. During those 10 years, he gave interviews, he met bishops, he spoke publicly. He remained one of the most respected voices in the Italian Church. Yet these particular words remained hidden. Why? The obvious answer is prudence. Ruini belonged to a generation that viewed public criticism differently. He was not a man of social media. He was not a man of public campaigns. He was not a man who settled disputes through headlines. When he disagreed, he usually did so quietly. When he expressed concern, he usually did so privately. And perhaps that is precisely what makes this testament so revealing, because these are the words he chose to leave behind when all considerations of diplomacy disappeared. No future appointment to protect, no reputation to defend, no position to maintain. Only truth as he saw it, and that truth included discomfort. Not rebellion, not outrage, discomfort. The word itself deserves attention, because discomfort implies tension. It implies uncertainty. It implies a conscience struggling to reconcile two realities: loyalty on one side, concern on the other. Love for the Church on one side, questions about its direction on the other. That balance defines the entire testament, and perhaps it also defines a much larger segment of the Catholic world than many people realize. There are countless Catholics today who love the Church deeply, who pray for the Pope, who attend Mass faithfully, who reject division, who reject schism, and yet who quietly share some of the same concerns that Ruini described, not because they hate the Church, but precisely because they love it. This is what makes the testament impossible to categorize. Progressives cannot easily dismiss it. Traditionalists cannot easily claim it as their own. The document belongs to neither camp. It belongs to a man whose entire life was spent defending ecclesial unity, and yet even he felt compelled to acknowledge that something remained unresolved. There is another detail worth examining. The testament became public only days after several other significant discussions were already taking place within the Church. Questions about synodality, questions about doctrinal development, questions about liturgy, questions about authority, questions about tradition. None of these debates emerged because of Ruini's testament. They were already happening. The testament simply entered an existing conversation, and suddenly the voice speaking was not a commentator, not a blogger, not a YouTube personality, but one of the most respected cardinals of the modern era. That changes the weight of the discussion immediately, because arguments can be dismissed, personalities can be ignored, but testimonies are different, especially final testimonies, especially the testimony of a man who knew the Church from the inside for over half a century. This explains why so many people reacted strongly to a single sentence. The sentence itself is brief. The life behind it is enormous. And there is one more aspect that deserves reflection. At Cardinal Ruini's funeral, Pope Leo XIV himself referred to the testament. Think about the symbolism. The words were not hidden. They were not buried. They were not censored. They were read openly within the heart of St. Peter's Basilica, before bishops, before priests, before cardinals, before the faithful. The Church did not attempt to erase them. The Church allowed them to be heard. That fact alone is significant, because whatever one thinks about Ruini's concerns, they now belong to the historical record. Future historians will read them, future priests will read them, future bishops will read them, and they will ask the same question many Catholics are asking today. What exactly was Cardinal Ruini trying to tell us? Perhaps the answer lies not in what he explicitly said. Perhaps it lies in what he chose not to say. Notice that he never identifies enemies, he never names factions, he never points fingers. Instead, he focuses on wounds. That choice is deeply revealing, because when someone focuses on enemies, the goal is victory. When someone focuses on wounds, the goal is healing. And healing requires honesty. No doctor heals a wound by pretending it does not exist. No family heals a division by pretending nothing happened. No church heals a crisis by refusing to acknowledge it. Ruini understood this. That is why his final message was not political, it was spiritual. He asks for forgiveness. He asks for prayer. He asks for mercy. And within that spiritual framework, he leaves a simple warning. Wounds that once struggled to heal appear to be reopening. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet perhaps that is enough. Because the older one becomes, the less interested one becomes in dramatic language. The less interested one becomes in slogans. The less interested one becomes in victories. And the more interested one becomes in truth. Camillo Ruini was 95 years old. He had nothing left to gain, nothing left to prove, nothing left to fear. And perhaps that is why his words carry such unusual weight. They come from a man standing at the threshold of eternity, a man looking backward over 70 years of priesthood, a man examining the church he loved, a man grateful for God's mercy, a man loyal to the Pope, a man loyal to the Council, a man loyal to the Church, and yet also a man honest enough to admit that certain developments troubled him. That honesty may ultimately be the most important part of his legacy, because loyalty without honesty becomes flattery, and honesty without loyalty becomes rebellion. Ruini attempted something more difficult. He tried to hold both together, to remain faithful while speaking truthfully, to remain respectful while expressing concern, to remain a son of the Church while acknowledging its wounds. That is not an easy balance. Few people achieve it. Yet in the final document of his life, Cardinal Camillo Ruini appears to have tried. And perhaps that is why his testament continues to resonate, not because it offers all the answers, but because it asks the right question. If even a man as loyal, measured, and experienced as Camillo Ruini felt compelled to speak of wounds reopening, should the rest of us pretend they do not exist? Or should we do what he did, Pray, remain faithful, seek truth, and ask God for the wisdom to heal what still hurts. What do you think? If you enjoyed this video, comment, Amen. God bless you.